We're at the River Thames, just across from the British Parliament. And the British Parliament is amazing, not only as a great architectural treasure with the wondrous and iconic Big Ben, but also because of the meaning of the British Parliament as one of the great inventions of politics that has transformed the entire world. Interestingly and importantly for us, what is today's British Parliament was originally Westminster Palace, a palace for the kings. And the transformation of the center of government from a palace of kings to a parliament of the people is indeed a millennium-long story of the transformation of politics from the rule of monarchy in this country to the rule of constitutional parliamentary democracy. It's a transformation that is extraordinarily rich in history and extraordinarily important in the history of the world. One could say that already in the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, that is before the Norman conquests in 1066, the Anglo-Saxon kings, when they needed to make a crucial decision or go to war or to mobilize resources from the nobility, called together the leaders, the nobles, the landowners for consultation. And so the initial roots of parliamentarism are kings that must get the consent and the consultation with the nobles in order to take action and decisions. After the Norman conquest in 1066, when William the Conqueror became the first Norman king of England, this place was originally the palace for the king, and the tradition of calling the nobles together for decision-making continued in the Norman kingdom. Over time, the kings decided to build a separate residence and move their principal residence to Windsor Castle. And it became gradually a tradition that still the assemblies of the great men of the kingdom would meet in this place. One of the decisive moments that we recall, though it did not seem so decisive at the time, occurred in 1215, when there was a confrontation between King John and various disaffected barons that objected to the king's rule. They met near Windsor in a place called Runnymede, and they agreed on a famous document, a compromise of power requiring the king to consult the barons. Of course, that was the Magna Carta in 1215. We look at the Magna Carta as the progenitor of modern parliamentarism, but it's important to note that both sides of that agreement quickly repudiated it in the immediate years after the Magna Carta was signed. But this continuing struggle and confrontation between Parliament and kings would continue for centuries. While it's a long and complex and tortuous history, we can jump to the 1600s as a decisive moment, because it was during the Stuart period when the confrontation between king and parliament came to a head, often over religious conflict. Would Britain be a Protestant nation under the Church of England, or would it revert to being a Catholic nation? And this consumed a great deal of the political energy and fervor of the 1600s. In 1642, there was an open revolt revolving around religious and other governance issues in which the Parliament repudiated the rule of the monarch, Charles I of the Stuart, House of Stuarts, and the king fled, and a civil war broke out, led by Oliver Cromwell and the Parliament against the king. Eventually, the king was captured, and in 1649 was beheaded in a regicide. During the 1650s, that civil war continued. Oliver Cromwell became a kind of king, but not under the title of monarchy, but as the so-called protector of the realm. This civil war eventually ended at the end of the 1650s with Cromwell's death, and in 1660 with the restoration of the monarchy, with Charles II as the new reigning monarch, but with tremendous tensions remaining between Parliament and the king. And these tensions rose dramatically during the rule of James II, when there was rumored return of England to Catholic rule under James II, and that led to a new revolt and a kind of coup in 1688, when the effective ruler of the Netherlands, William of Orange, whose wife was the daughter of James II, was summoned to become King of England. And in 1689, he proved victorious, and the so-called Glorious Revolution took place, in which William of Orange became the king, but with a new set of relative powers agreed between Parliament and the king, continuing to shift ever more the powers away from the monarch and towards the Parliament. And these decisive changes of the Glorious Revolution included a new Bill of Rights and an agreement by the new king, William of Orange, that he would abide by the legislation of the Parliament. In other words, we're watching in history the steady development of a parliamentary system and a constitutional monarchy. This continued in the 1700s with the continuing assertion of the now House of Commons, the House of representing the peoples of the nation, asserting more and more control and more claims to power in a continuing battle between the monarchy and the Parliament. But until the 1800s, until the 19th century, the Parliament itself was not electorally representative of the population. In the early 1800s, roughly 1 in 10 males had the franchise, had the right to vote. The vote was restricted to the wealthy. The representation was fraught with corruption and so-called rotten boroughs, in which the vote was really controlled by a small elite part of the population. During the 19th century, modern parliamentarism in Britain developed through a series of fundamental reform acts that not only continue to center sovereign power in the Parliament, but also extended the franchise so that the Parliament would become more electorally representative of the people. Three major reform acts were 1832, the first Reform Act, which extended the franchise to parts of the middle class. This itself was shocking because the vote was now expanding to a larger part of the population. This continued in a following Reform Act of 1867, which further extended the franchise, and then again in the Reform Act of 1884. Well, as the franchise expanded to the male population, there was another half of the population that was still not properly represented, and representation and the franchise of women came in the 20th century. First expanding the franchise to women over the age of 30, and then finally equalizing the franchise of men and women, and in the latest of the Reform Acts, reducing the age of suffrage for both men and women from the age of 21 to the age of 18. Universal suffrage for citizens over the age of 18. We see that we have in front of us the House of Parliament representing a 1,000-year transformation from a kingship in which monarchs would occasionally consult the nobles to a system of governance in which the monarchy today is the head of state, the representation of the people in King Charles, but not the political lead, not the head of government. And the head of government is, of course, a cabinet that is voted and must have the support of the Parliament, of the House of Commons. That 1,000-year transformation to parliamentary democracy is one of the decisive developments of politics in the world, and parliamentarism, given birth here, spread to much of the world and is the basis for representation, the basis for legislation, the basis for political power in much of the world. And we thank the long history of Britain, all the struggles which gave us the institutions today of parliamentarism, which serve so much for the well-being of peoples around the world.